the Dragon Table, I'll be going over how to play Tzolk'in, the Mayan Calendar. This is a fairly new game. I believe it came out in 2012. It's been very popular at my local gaming society. It's usually always one of the games that's always out and being played. It can be a little bit fiddly, but it is an interesting mechanism. It deals with worker placement and resource management in order to gain points and win the game. So let's take a look. So this is going to be a 3-player game of Tzolk'in. I've got blue, red, and green. When you play less than 4, it's a 2 to 4 player game. If you play less than 4 players, then the game is set up a little bit differently. You only have 5 monuments if you have 4, or if you have 3 players, and that's denoted by these little, you probably can't even see them, they're just little teeny guys. There are 4 of them on this spot. Same thing when it comes to the palanque wheel with corn and logging. You have 1 less on each spot that you can harvest from, and that also is denoted by 4 little guys. And if you play with 2 players, there's a 3 little guys symbol, so you play with even less. I've got all of my corn in the middle, and the corn is kind of the currency of the game. I've also got a bank that has my skulls, I've got gold, I've got wood, stone, and I have the other workers that you'll have a chance to get during the game. During the game you start, or at the beginning of the game, you start with 3 workers per person, and you can have a chance to get another worker as the game goes on, either because of a building or from this action on the Uxmal wheel. So it probably looks a little overwhelming, a little complicated, and it kind of is at first. And it's kind of, there's, in terms of worker placement, it's probably got more choices than almost any worker placement type game. The limiting factor is going to be the fact that you have to pay corn in order to put your workers out, which is a different mechanism than most worker placement games. Most of the time when you're playing worker placement games, you're putting workers out, you're not having to pay to put them out. And in this case, you're actually having to pay. You have to pay based on the space that you put them on, and you also have to pay based on the little chart that's on your player board. If you put out 1 worker, you don't have to pay any corn. If you put out, and if you put out 2 workers, you have to pay 1 corn, 3 workers, you have to put out 3 corn, and so on, and it explains on this chart. This is the first player token. You're supposed to give it to the person who has most recently sacrificed something. And if you can't decide if someone hasn't sacrificed anything recently, firstborn, I don't know, then you're supposed to choose someone who is going to sacrifice something. That might be a difficult one to decide who the first player is. The other thing that you have to do if you're playing with less than 4 players is you have to set out some guys that are going to basically block areas, but we'll get to that in a second. And they, in the booklet, they recommend that you can use, since yellow is the color that we're not playing with in this game, that you would use the workers to block spots, and by doing that you would be putting them in these places. I like to use these markers because they're lower, so they don't get in the way as much, but you can still clearly see that the space is blocked. But they're not going to get in the way, and you're not going to confuse them for someone else's workers. But I'll explain how to place those in a minute because we have to do something else first. And that is deal out starting tiles, starting wealth tiles. Everyone gets 4 of these, and I'm just going to do 4 to everybody. And you get to choose 2 of these to keep. And each of them gives you a benefit, and usually it's a benefit for the beginning of the game. Sometimes it's a benefit that can continue throughout the game, but it'll define what your starting resources are. And just a hint, since the very first thing you're going to be doing is placing workers that requires you to pay corn, I highly recommend that you choose some wealth starting tokens that give you some corn. now that we've done that, before everyone chooses which ones they're going to keep, we're actually going to choose which spots get blocked by these little yellow blocker guys. And again, this is something that you don't have to do if you're playing a 4-player game, but if you're playing a 3 or a 2-player game, then you have to do this. If you're playing a 2-player game, you have to do it with 2 different colors. For a 4-player game or for a 3-player game, we're just using 1 color. So what you do now is you take the rest of the wealth tiles that weren't handed out, and we're going to flip one over, and down at the very bottom, it denotes a location. This one is Yakchalan 1. Please excuse my pronunciation, I do not speak Mayan. So Yakchalan 1, so that means it would go in the 1 spot of Yakchalan. And if it's the first one that's placed on that particular dial, which in this case it is, then you place another one in the exact opposite spot, like that. And then we do another one. This is Palank 3. It says it on this little thing. So we'll put 1 on Palank 3, and then again it's the first color on that wheel, so we'll do the opposite. And then Chikan Itza 3. This one you actually don't place 1 on the opposite side. That's just unique to that particular wheel. The Chikan Itza wheel is a little bit different than the other ones. It's bigger, for one thing, and it's all the theology stuff. We got 1 more to place, and that goes on Tikal 1. So that goes right there. And then these all get put away, off to the side. And now for the rest of the game, these guys are going to stay out. So what happens during the game is this wheel, this giant wheel, gets rotated, which spins all of the other gears. So depending on what turn it is, these yellow little guys are going to block different spots, and no one will be able to put a worker there that turn. But because the wheel turns, you're going to have a chance to have those spots open back up again. So now everyone would look at their wealth tiles and figure out which ones they want to choose. Now, I'll show you an example. I've got one that would give me 5 corn, 1 stone, and would let me move up 1 on the red temple. And the temple will give you benefits on food days and at the end of the game. And food days are going to be a total of 4 food days that will occur when the wheel hits certain spots. And at the end of the game, you'll also get bonuses. You may also possibly get bonuses from temples if you have a certain building or monument that gives you points for that. So this one would give me 3 corn. I'd move up 1 on the yellow temple, and I would also move forward 1 on the agriculture technology track, which is over here. And moving forward 1 on the agriculture technology track would mean that when I harvest corn, I get an additional corn. And that happens over here on the Palank wheel. And that's the only place where you would get that bonus of +1 corn. This one would give me 3 corn, 2 wood, and 1 stone. So it's just resources. And this would give me 1 extra worker. So I have to figure out which is going to be the best for me. I need to make sure, obviously, that I get some corn, otherwise I will not be able to place any workers. Although, if you need to place workers and you don't have any corn, you can beg to the gods, or you can beg for corn. And what that means is that if you have less than 2 corn, you can beg for corn. It gives you 3 corn, but it angers the gods, and you move down 1 on one of the temple tracks. You can also burn the forest in order to get to the corn that's underneath it. That also angers the gods. Let's see, I think I'm not too worried about having an extra worker at this point, so I'm not going to do that one. This is a nice benefit of being able to go forward on the agricultural track for free, because normally in order to go forward on the agricultural track, you have to use an action and spend a resource to do it. So I think I'll probably take that one. and then I'll probably take the one that gives me a bunch of resources. So that's what I would choose. And my other ones get thrown away. And then you keep these in front of you during the game, because some of them will give you benefits throughout the game. These don't, but some of them do. So I take 6 corn from the bank in the middle, and I move up 1. I'm red. I move up 1 on the yellow temple, and I move forward 1 on the agriculture technology track. I also get 2 wood and a stone. And then we do the same thing for our other players. If you're ever not sure what one of the symbols means, somewhere on the board or on one of your cards or on one of the buildings or your wealth tiles, on the back of the rule book it has a complete list of what all of these things mean. So you can always refer to that. So I think what we're going to do is we'll do these 2 for him, which will give him 7 corn to start with, 2 wood, and a crystal skull. And now for the rest of the game, what this little guy means is a picture of a little guy with 2 corn next to him and a check mark. It means that on food day, one of his workers does not need to be fed. Normally you have to feed your workers 2 corn on food day. The skulls are used on the Tzolk'in Itza wheel. There's a space that looks like almost like a little mirror where you can put a skull if you're taking that action. And then that action can't be taken for the rest of the game. So that's why this wheel is a little bit different than the other ones. And then this guy, he's going to get 8 corn. And 3 wood, 1 stone, and he gets to move forward 1 on the green track, and he's blue. One thing you want to think about, if you're the 3rd or 4th player, because you know who the first player is by this point, whenever you're placing workers, you have to place them on the lowest numbered spot. Meaning the least expensive spot. So the people who go first, like the 1st and the 2nd player, are going to be placing workers on the lowest numbered spots. So if you're the 3rd or 4th player that's going, you know you're going to have to be spending corn in order to place your workers out. In addition to the corn that you have to spend just for placing workers, you're going to be probably having to put them on higher cost spots. So when you're choosing your wealth tiles, if you're the 3rd or 4th player, it makes sense to choose tiles that will give you maybe more corn, so that you'll have more options for placing workers that first turn. Just a suggestion. So below the temple tracks, there's the technology tracks. This first one is agriculture. And as you move up the agriculture track, you will get the bonus that's listed plus the bonuses that you've already passed. So they're cumulative bonuses. This one is bonus for harvesting. This one is a bonus for resource management. This one is bonus for building. And it only applies to buildings, does not apply to monuments. So if you build a monument, these benefits do not apply. And this is theology. So this mostly applies to the Tzolk'in Itza tracks. Although this particular one applies to this specific action on the Yaxchilan wheel, where you would get an extra skull from this action. You can go no further than 3, the 3rd spot. And if something would happen that would cause you to go higher, you get a bonus. And this bonus is different depending on which track you're on. So you wouldn't actually move into that spot. You would stay where you are, continue to get the same bonuses, but then you would, or the same benefits, but you would also get whatever bonus is listed here. In this case, it's move up the temple track of your choice. Here you get 2 resources of your choice. Here you get 3 victory points, and here you get a skull. And then these are the monuments you have to choose from. They are the same throughout the game. They do not get replaced. The buildings do get replaced. The buildings get replaced at the end of the turn if anyone has built a building, and they get completely replaced on food day. and it depends on what age you're in. At the beginning of the game, it's the first age, so we start with these tiles, and then we're in the second half of the game, you go to these tiles. So there are a whole bunch of different actions that you can take, depending on which wheel you've chosen to place on. During your turn, you can either place workers and pay the corn associated with it, or you can take workers and take actions. You cannot place workers and take actions on the same turn. So if it's later in the game, and let's say I had a couple of workers out, I'm just randomly placing them out, and I had one worker still sitting by my hand, I would have to choose. Either I can place this additional worker out and end my turn, or I can choose to pick up either one or both of these guys and take the action. But I can't do both. So at the beginning of the game, the first player goes first and puts all of their workers out where they want them to. I'm probably going to want to put one here because this is going to get the way I can get corn later to replace the corn that I spend to put my guys out. I think I want to place one here because I like the idea maybe of being able to build in a little bit, because I already have 2 wood and a stone. So I already see at least one building that I can build. There are 2, 3. There are 3 buildings out already that I can build. If I get to this spot or this spot. As you can see, the monuments take a lot more to build. The required elements for building each thing are listed in the top left corner. Or as in the case of monuments, they're listed all the way across the top because there's so many of them. And maybe I want the chance to get some resources. So let's say, well, maybe I want the chance to get another guy, so I'm going to put another guy here. So I was able to put, because I was the first player, I had to put my guys on the lowest marker, which was 0, the 0 marker on all of these wheels. So that cost me 0 corn, but I put 3 guys out, so that costs 3 corn, according to the little chart. There's also another place you can put a worker, which is right here on this spot. This is the first player token. If you put a worker on this spot, at the end of the turn, the first player marker then gets moved to whoever put that token there, unless it's the person who has the first player marker. If you have the first player marker and you put a worker here, then it moves to the player on your left. So the worker token, or the first player token, always moves if someone puts a token here, whether or not it's the person who has it. If someone plays here, there are also some different things that happen. That person gets the chance, if they want to move the wheel 2 days instead of 1 day. They can also pick up all of the corn that has been left on the teeth of the wheel, which is going to happen at the end of each turn if no one places a token there. So I know it's a little bit confusing. I'm just trying to hit all the bases. So now the person on my left would take their turn, and so they would choose where to go. And they've got 2 wood. They do have a skull, so they might go on this track because they know that they'll be able to take one of these actions because they've got a skull. And that way it doesn't cost them anything to do that. They have 2 wood, but I'm sure that they're thinking ahead about corn, so let's have them place 1 here. And then maybe they'll think, like I say, maybe they're thinking about resources, so they'll put 1 here. So that means that they've put a total of 0, 0, and 1. And they put 3 workers out, so that costs them a total of 4 corn. So they pay 4 corn to the bank. And then our little blue friend will take his turn. And so you see how now the third person has fewer choices, and it's going to be more expensive for him to place workers out, especially since we've got some that are blocked by the yellow tokens that aren't the player that's not being used in the game. Because in order for him to play here, which is probably what he wants to do, that's going to cost him 2 just to play a guy here. We'll have him put 1 here. That'll be 3. And if he puts 1 here, that's a total of 5. Plus, he put 3 workers out, that's 8, which is the total number of corn that he has. So that cost him 8 corn to place all of his guys out. And that's the end of the first turn. So what you do is you rotate this counterclockwise. Yeah, try and remember that. You rotate this counterclockwise 1 day. And sometimes it can get a little sticky to get it exactly 1 day. And then you put 1 food, since no one played on the first player marker, you put 1 food on that tooth for that day. And then later, if someone plays on the first player marker, they get to collect all of the food from the teeth. Now, this is not my favorite mechanic in the game because your bank of food is supposed to stay on this big wheel. It can be easy for pieces to get near the teeth, and it can be confusing as to whether a piece of food is supposed to be on a tooth or not. So try and separate those. Maybe you can even keep them off the wheel if you want to. That's where the game recommends that you put them, but you can put them off to the side if you wanted to. So now let's see what happens when you take actions, because now everybody has their pieces out, so no one can place pieces this turn. Everyone has to take actions. So it's still my turn because no one did the first player marker. And as you can see, what happened when this wheel turned is everybody's pieces advanced 1. So now this red token is at this action point, which means I would pay 3 corn to move up 1 on any of the temple tracks. I'm not interested in doing that, so I'm not going to pick up that guy. This guy I'm looking more towards using to get another guy, possibly. This guy here would let me move forward on one of the technology tracks if I pay a resource. Not too interested in doing that. I'm more interested in building. So I'm trying to get to this spot, which will be in the next turn. So let's see about over here. Over here I could fish, which would give me 3 corn. There's no separate types of food in this game, so corn just represents all food. It is the weirdest tasting corn fish you've ever, I don't know. So I could take this guy back and get 3 corn, but I already won ahead on the technology track for agriculture, which means that I get plus corn if I harvest, which is what I would be doing over here on this spot, not here. I would have to move forward 1 more on the technology track in order to get a bonus corn here. So I'm thinking I'm probably just going to leave my guys out because I'm not really thrilled with the choices that I have right now. So I don't take any actions this turn, and now the person to my left goes. He could get a wood from here, but he already has 2 wood. He's probably looking to get some different type of resources. Over here, if he played on this spot, he could move up 1 on the red track, and by playing his skull. And he would also get 4 victory points by doing that. Now, if he waits a couple of turns, he'd get more victory points. Maybe he would get a chance to move up higher on another track that he's more interested in. So he maybe will skip that turn as well. Because there is a bonus to being highest on one of these tracks, and only 1 person can be at the very, very top of each track. So his other option here is harvesting, which I think he is probably going to do. It's not a bad idea. So he takes his guy back. He takes this corn harvest tile, and he takes 4 corn, because you get 4. I'm going to give him a 5 spot and put 1 back. You get 4 corn when you harvest from this action spot. Here you get either 5 corn or 2 wood, depending on the first thing you have to do is you have to harvest the wood, and then you can harvest the corn your next turn. Or you could burn the wood and get straight to the corn, but that, like I said before, that angers the gods. You do have another option which I will point out when we go over the blue guy's turn. So now a green guy's done, and now it's the blue guy's turn. So let's see. And I'm going to point out what you can do with him. Let's see here. If he takes this action, he can convert resources to corn or vice versa using the chart. 2 corn is 1 wood, 3 corn is a stone, and 4 corn is a gold. So he could either get resources from corn, which he doesn't have any corn, so he can't do that, or he could get corn from resources. If he wanted to, say, turn in a wood, he could get 2 corn. But he's not interested in doing that this turn. Over here, he could get a gold and 2 corn. That sounds intriguing. I believe he's going to do that. So he's going to take a gold and 2 corn. Now over here, here's where I'll point out what your other option is on these wheels. He can do one of 3 different things in this action spot. He can either harvest the wood and get 2 wood from this, or he could burn the wood and harvest the corn directly. If he did that, he would get 5 corn, but he would have to move down 1 on one of the temple tracks. Or he could pay 1 corn and use the action that is 1 less than where he's currently located. You can't pay corn to move up, but you could pay corn to move down. So he could pay 1 corn to take the action that was located 1 down from where he was and harvest this corn, which would give him 4. So don't forget that that's an option, especially if you've planned poorly and you accidentally got past a spot that you wanted to, or maybe there's an action that you want to be able to take twice, or, well, actually you wouldn't be able to do that because you have to take your guy back, but in any case, if there's an action that you've passed that you want to use, and that actually can happen here, especially if someone harvests wood and then there's corn open and you've passed it, you can pay corn to go backwards and take that action. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility than you think you have. So now it's the end of the turn. We rotate counterclockwise 1 day. And we place a food on the tooth. And now is when it can become a little bit more complicated, because, not for me, because all my 3 guys are all out. So I don't have a choice of whether or not I'm placing or taking actions. I can only take actions. But for my green friend who has 1 worker free, my blue friend who has 2 workers free, they're going to have to choose if they're going to take actions or if they're going to place their workers. Because you can only do one or the other. You can't do both. Now when you get to, when this marker right here reaches this arrow, and it'll tell you how many days you have until that happens. Like it says right here, we have 5 days to go until we get there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a mid-age food day would occur. And on that day, everyone would have to pay their workers 2 corn each. If you can't pay your worker, you lose 3 points. So for each worker that you can't pay, and you can't pay half, you can't feed your worker 1 corn. You have to feed them 2 corn. This guy, remember, has a benefit of one of his workers is already fed. So that's the other thing to think about when you're maybe on 1 or 2 days before food day, is to make sure that you've got extra corn to feed your workers. And it doesn't matter if they're on the board or on your little play area, they have to be fed. The ones in the bank don't have to be fed yet. The other thing that happens on food day is that all of the buildings will get replaced. So if there's a building that you want, make sure that you build it before you get to food day. The other thing that happens in the middle of the age food day is that you're going to get the benefits of whatever level you're on in the temples. So you also want to think about that. This guy, for instance, at this level, there's no benefit for him. It would be the benefits that are on the left side. So he would want to maybe try to move up one so he could get a gold on food day. Here, this temple gives out stone, this temple gives out wood, and if you get high enough, it gives out a crystal. The numbers on the side are victory points, and those are the ones that you get during the end of age food day, which are these little blue guys. And remember, after you do this food day is going to come first, then you're going to get this food day, and this is the change of the age, is when you get the second age. So when you replace the buildings, when you get to this age, remember to replace them with buildings from the second age, which is this stack. And then for the rest of the game, you draw buildings from this stack. And the game ends after the fourth food day. So after we've gone all the way around, and we get back to the place that we started, the game ends. And everyone converts their commodities into points. The first thing you do is you convert all your resources into corn using the guidelines here, where 1 wood equals 2 corn, 1 stone equals 3 corn, and 1 gold equals 4 corn. You then get 1/4 of a point for each corn. In other words, 4 corn is equal to 1 point. Any crystal skulls that you haven't placed get 3 points. And then you may also get additional points for buildings, depending on what buildings you've made. Some buildings aren't going to give you any points. And some monuments will give you points at the end of the game as well. And at the end of the game, whoever has the most points wins. It's a really interesting mechanic, planning ahead for how the wheel spins. It's also fun to turn the wheel. Whee! It can, like I say, it can get a little sticky at times, so be careful you don't go tipping over workers and corn and all that and making quite the mess. Try to keep your corn in the center so that it doesn't get mixed up with the corn that's on the teeth, on the edges. But if you can get over the little fiddliness of the game, it's really quite interesting and a very thinking type of game. Probably a little bit more thinky than the average worker placement Euro game. But it's quite a lot of fun, so I hope you have fun playing Tzolk'in, and thanks for visiting the Dragon Table. I will see you next time.